Good night, church. Let me just go ahead and get the water ready. Okay. I would first like to thank every single person for attending the events for Black History Month for First Baptist Church of Sunrise, Florida. Whether this is your first event, to those who have attended every event, or those in between, we certainly could not have done this without your support. We hope that you have gleaned information that was applicable to your personal health journey, that you will take it with you beyond just this month. A special thanks to all the members of the Historical and Cultural Committee, Sister Hyacinth Barkley, Sister Jacqueline Roy, Brother Leroy Kerr, Sister Corinne King, Sister Bernice Seymour, and Deacon Coral Jonas. Your dedication to this project was pivotal. As the first set of in-person programs for this church for 2022, you have really set the tone for the rest of the year. All of your efforts, contributions, and actions have been the center of momentum for this month. Rallying together and filling in conceptual gaps that I, as the new chairperson, wouldn't have even considered was essential. Most of you have been my mentors, my leaders, my teachers, as a babe coming up in this very church, and it has been an honor to work with you and be supported by you during this process, and I thank you very much. Additionally, I would like to thank our special guests and keynote speakers, Reverend the Honorable Norman Hemming, Dr. Alicia Ruff, Dr. Rosalie Brown, and therapist and professor Jean Carlos Simpson for sharing your wisdom and education with us. Your words and time are valuable beyond measure, and I know that each one of you took something from their teaching that will better our health and wellness. So on behalf of Pastor Reverend Dr. Amos Farquharson, Reverend Everton Jackson, the deacons, and members of First Baptist Church of Sunrise, we thank you. So tonight is the last event in Black History Month, the national theme being health and wellness, if you haven't guessed by now. So it was never a hesitation that we needed to focus on mental health awareness. The state of our mental health as a nation, and specifically as Black people, is in crisis. As Black people, we suffer from a peculiar framework which shapes our mental health. A term that I would like to introduce to you is generational trauma. Just as it sounds, trauma is a deeply distressing, disturbing experience, but generational trauma is not just limited to our individual lives, but generationally. We as Black people carry traumas of the generations before us: separation from our homelands, inhumane and unjustified societal conditions in the form of institutionalized and legalized chattel slavery, dehumanization, torture, torment, and terrorization by government-supported organizations aimed to eliminate and euthanize our people. Eugenics, the practice with the aim to eliminate the genetic qualities of a human population, in particular us. Discrimination and systemic, structural, and institutional racism aim to marginalize us from general society, making it more difficult for us to secure fruitful employment, suitable and stable living conditions, education, even to assemble peacefully. Quite honestly and frankly, an extreme opposition for us to even exist and live freely under a constitution that promises freedom for us all. These are some of the items on the short list of traumas that you will don should you be born or live Black in America. So is there any really wonder why our mental health is in crisis? As people of faith, we know that the battlefield is in the mind. 2 Timothy 3:17, that the man of God should be competent, equipped for every good work. Everything we do, every good or bad work, stems from the processes of our brain. And if our minds are not healthy, we cannot be healthy and have fruitful lives. So to break down a couple things, what exactly is a mental illness? On a biological level, many mental illnesses have been linked to abnormal functioning of our nerve cells and circuits or pathways that connect particular regions and parts of our brain. Sometimes, as well on a biological level, imbalances in the neurotransmitters, or what we also call neurochemicals in our brains, there's imbalances in those. Certain neurochemicals like serotonin, dopamine, or oxytocin. Genetics can also play a part. Brain defects and injuries can also be a biological factor that aids in the development of a mental illness. Psychological factors, like some of the traumatic experiences that I just listed, or neglect, and environmental factors such as social or cultural expectations. Here are some of the statistics on the state of our mental health in America. Depression is the leading cause of disability in the United States. Let me say that one more time. Depression, not heart failure, not cancers, not any physical ailment or physical illness, but depression is the leading cause of disability in the United States, an invisible disability that affects millions of Americans daily. 1 in 5 adults experienced a mental illness in 2020. 1 in 20 experienced a serious mental illness, and over 12 million Americans had serious thoughts of suicide. There has been a 2 to 4% increase in anxiety and depression in our preschool age children. Only 20% of children who actually have a mental, behavioral, or emotional disorder received the care that they needed from a specialized mental health professional. Now, as it relates to us, Black people, we represent some 13% of the United States population, and yet 33% have reported having a mental health issue and or condition. That is almost 9 million Americans. As expected, most of us are not able to access or afford the services due to the barriers mentioned earlier. Black people are more likely to experience chronic and persistent mental health conditions in comparison to episodic or short-term acute mental illnesses. COVID-19 has really opened our eyes to the existing health inequities and disparities that we face as a people, and especially in our mental health. This is evident in the 4.4 million people, Americans, quitting their job in September 2021. Many people are starting to prioritize their physical and mental health over their ability to work for corporations who do not value those same things. This is now forcing organizations to change their salaries, their pay scales, their benefits, and their PTO in order to attract people to work. This is now what is being called the Great Resignation, of which I happen to be part of. According to NAMI, the average time between symptom onset, meaning the first symptom of a mental illness, and treatment is 11 years. Imagine over a decade before somebody has experienced or is even aware of a mental health symptom before they're able to access care or treatment. Mental health treatment such as therapy, medication, and self-care have made recovery a reality for most people experience mental illness. Although taking the first steps can be confusing and difficult, it is important to explore your resources and options for care. Yet, there is still hope for recovery, and yes, you can recover from mental health conditions with the right treatment and support system. The point of all of these statistics that I'm listing is to let you know that mental health illness is common. It is not something that is far removed from us. It is something that your friends, your family members, your community members are dealing with, whether you know it or not. And this is why we call it an invisible disability. Because most people with mental health illness go to extreme lengths in order to cover their symptoms, to mask themselves, not with our medical mask, but mask the symptoms so that they feel they can fit into society normally. Your mental health should not be an afterthought. It should be taken care of as importantly and as regularly as your physical health. Going to therapy and/or counseling is not to solely be employed by those who have a recognized mental illness. Therapy and counseling should be part of everyone's health and wellness regimen. Many people are unaware that their employer's health insurance carries something called EAP, or Employee Assistance Program. This allows for a certain amount of free and completely confidential counseling services to the employee. If you are enrolled in university, most institutions provide free or low-cost behavioral health services for students and staff. In your community, our community, you are often able to find low-cost or sliding scale professional services to aid in your mental health journey. If you are in the audience right now and thinking, I don't need mental health services, I don't need therapy, I don't need counseling, may I suggest to you, it is often the people who think that they don't need help that need the most help. We must remember that we are humans and made for connection. Financial struggles, family issues, occupational and work issues, loss, death, natural disasters, spiritual and religious matters, major life changes and illnesses are things that we all go through, and it is important to have unbiased and professional conversations about these matters that plague us all, especially for us in the diaspora. No other race worries about leaving their homes and if they will return safely that night. No other race worries about if a simple traffic stop will end up in imprisonment or a loss of life. And unfortunately, we as people have taken that on as our status quo, not realizing that the normalization of such ideas is detrimental to our mental and emotional health. I am standing here as a mental health advocate in the process of receiving my master's in psychology and expressing my deepest desires that every Black person in this room and within the sound of my voice will seek the support of a trained mental health professional. Seeking therapy does not mean that you have a mental illness or condition. It simply means that you are a human being that has a series of complex life situations that can use sorting and exploration in order to continue your personal development into the best version of yourself, no matter what age. It is time to reduce the stigma that surrounds mental health. Unfortunately, the institution of the church and other faith-based organizations have been at the center of stigmatization of mental health illness. We can all recall hearing or being the person who has said, "Oh, that person is a little touched." Or, "Never mind them. Them are right. Right? Okay. Or somebody is crazy, insane, weird, too emotional, or too sensitive. These are common phrases that add to stigma. And when there is stigma, people who are experiencing mental health issues are less likely to seek help, and that is detrimental, not only to the individual, but our society. And when people are afraid to seek help, the ramifications are grand. Increased depression, anxiety, morbidities, I can't say this word today. Morbidities. Slow down, my mother would say. All right, and these are co-occurring illnesses or conditions that actually stemmed from the original condition, but without treatment, without the proper supports, have now branched off to a problem that is bigger than it once was. Decrease in the quality of life, and even more sad, the potential for suicide. Suicide is the 10th leading cause of death in the world. In recent years, the rates of suicide in Black youth have doubled, outpacing the rate of their white counterparts. With the effects of COVID-19, the outstanding rate of teacher and professional turnover in the educational system, students are not able to access the already limited behavioral health services that they need. Men in the United States are almost 4 times more likely to die by suicide than women. And women are more likely to have suicidal ideations or suicidal thoughts. 47,000 men died by suicide in 2019 in the United States. And that rate is increasing in the Black community and in our Black men. When we condemn people to hell for acting on suicidal ideations or saying they committed suicide, creates barriers for those who are experiencing difficulties in reaching out for help. Let's change that phrase. Because when we say somebody committed suicide, what are we insinuating? That they've committed a crime? That they've committed a sin? When in actuality, this person did not feel the support of their community, their families, friends, faith organizations, schools to reach out for help. Because of the stigma, they believed that they were a burden. They often did not know how to access the crucial mental and behavioral health services that could have changed the course of their lives. For Black youth, the mental health reality is scary. Already facing institutional adversities as it relates to food and housing security, financial and economic uncertainty, inequitable education and healthcare, our youth are already at risk for mental health illness. This recent increase in suicide and suicide attempts in our community should be the precipice in which we stand to change the narrative, reduce stigma surrounding mental health. Our community needs us. Our children need us to educate ourselves about mental health, to be able to have these conversations and be knowledgeable about navigating our behavioral and mental health care system, so that we can receive the care that we so desperately need. Suicide is 100% preventable. We as a church and we as a people need to change our views around this topic so that not one more of our children or adults feel that suicide or self-harm is the answer to life's burdensome toll. I stand before you not only as a member of this church and of this community, not only as a mental health advocate, not only as a student in a master's psychology program, but also as a mental health illness survivor. Diagnosed with ADHD, or attention deficit hyperactive disorder, in 2021 at the age of 30. I lived my whole life knowing that something was not right, but not knowing how to fix it. Attention deficit hyperactive disorder is a neurobiological condition that affects certain neurotransmitters or the neurochemicals in my brain that affect my executive functioning. Executive function are the most essential parts of our living. It includes things like organization, planning, starting and finishing tasks, self-monitoring and self-control, maintenance, management. Literally, it affects every portion and every minute of my life. But with the health disparities existing for girls, often being recognized with mental or emotional health issues at the rate of 1 to 4 in comparison to boys, layered with the health disparities for Black people, I was never diagnosed in my school ages. Additionally, I was a high-performing, academically gifted student. No one thought that this otherwise happy girl could have anything wrong with her. But as the structure of grade school dissipated, my struggles began to manifest more evidently. I began to struggle in college, something that had never happened to me before. I struggled with social relationships. I struggled with managing my life. Most of these things were overlooked, even by me, refusing to go to the doctor because I know that I was not going to be taken seriously or receive the care that I needed. My struggles intensified as I started my early career as a teacher and exasperated to the point where I could no longer help myself with the self-care and coping skills that I designed. At 27, I began my mental health journey after the trauma of Hurricane Harvey in Houston, Texas, and the suicide of one of my students. I was overlooked and ignored, as expected, and I was misdiagnosed and therefore mistreated. My life suffered until the breaking point in 2020. Educating them since then, my family, co-workers, and friends, my tribe, has surrounded and supported me throughout this journey, educating themselves and rallying around me when I needed them most. I am happy to say now that I am medication-free, and yes, I still struggle daily, but this is my personal journey, and I will see it out to the end. I have turned this pain into passion by creating an online community that centers around mental health awareness for all, but specifically supporting Black women and women of color diagnosed with ADHD. Building it to provide education and resources for people to access as the topic of mental health awareness continues to move into the forefront of social impact movements. I can honestly say that if it had not been for the grace of God, my family, and my healthcare professionals, I would not be standing in front of you today. I renewed my faith walk in 2018 and began to redevelop and create a personal relationship with the Most High, not knowing what was before me. In my darkest and loneliest days, it was the renewed faith that kept me alive. I often went to prayer and the Word for comfort for this battle I was fighting that I did not know that I was fighting and had no clue on how to fight. It was through this process that I learned the Bible is not just a book of theology, sociology, or history. It is also a book of psychology. There are many verses that speak to how we are to set our mind because, again, that is where the battlefield lies. The verses selected tonight were purposeful. James 1:1-8. My brethren, count it all joy when you fall into the various trials, knowing that the testing of your faith produces patience, but let patience have its perfect work, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking nothing. If any of you lack wisdom, let him ask of God, who gives it to all liberally and without reproach, and it will be given to him. But let him ask in faith, with no doubting, for he who doubts is like a wave of the sea, driven and tossed by the wind. For not that man suppose that he will receive anything from the Lord. He is a double-minded, unstable in all of his ways. I stood firmly on 2 Timothy 1:7. For God had not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and a sound mind. 2 Corinthians 10:4-5, for the weapons of our warfare are not carnal, but mighty through God to the pulling down of strongholds, casting down imaginations, and every high thing that exalted itself against the knowledge of God, and bring it into captivity, every thought to the obedience of Christ. Proverbs 12:25, anxiety in the heart of man causes depression, but a good word makes it glad. Philippians 4:6, be anxious for nothing. Be anxious for nothing, but in everything by and with, let your requests be made known to God. And Philippians 4:8, finally, brethren, whatsoever things are true, honest, pure, lovely, of good report, if there be any virtue and if there be any praise, think on these things. And finally, Psalms 23:4, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thy are with me, thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. I stood on the promises of the Almighty, and there have been studies that show there is a positive correlation between spirituality and mental health. Those factors being faith, meditation, prayer, and community. May I submit to this church and this community that we change our stance as it relates to the education and understanding about our mental health conditions in our community. That we are no longer additives to the issue, but proponents to the solution. That we make space and become comfortable with having the difficult and deep conversations about our mental health. That we become the support system that we need in order to overcome all issues, including this one in our community. Thank you. Thank you so much, church. Thank you so much, not just for listening, but creating the space, the safety and the space and the environment for me allowing to be vulnerable with you. I needed some help for tonight, not just the committee members, but I also called on my good friend, Giancarlo Simpson. He is a therapist and professor at Lynn University. He is going to help us go through a mindfulness activity that relates to our mental health that we can carry with us as we leave today. So I would like you all to welcome him up, Giancarlo Simpson. Okay, so this is going to require a little bit of movement. So what we're going to do is we're going to call on Monet Ratigan for the special selection as we put together the activity. We are going to ask you all to stand because her song requires some motion, and not to sit down because we are going to be rearranging ourselves into groups of about 5 or 6, all right? So go back to the classroom. I'm going back to being a teacher, all right? So you guys get to pick your groups, okay? But we're also going to keep in mind our COVID regulations. So there's a lot of space in the church. So just think about who you want to be in your group, and then you guys can find a couple chairs in an area so that we can do this activity. It will take about 10 minutes, okay? So Monet, once again, welcome her as she comes up.
evening, church.
Good evening.
We're gonna get active. Yesterday we had a good time with our exercise session. It was wonderful. We had a very, very good time. And as we are in the month of health and wellness, and as Nishma just talked about mental health, we're gonna do a little physical health, a little physical exercise now while they are singing the song. And yesterday, I have something to tell you guys. It was so good. People like Sister King and Sister Bernice, and I'm not gonna tell you guys anymore. You have to come to the next exercise session. All right, and we want